So hi everybody and welcome back to a special edition of the Web of Wyrd podcast with myself, Davyd Farrell, and my co-host Pete Jackson-Main. Hey brother, how you doing?
Well, for the benefit of those listening, I'm doing absolutely fine. It's not been easy the last few weeks, I have to say. I think you will echo that, and maybe a few other people will as well.
Right, so we have been unusually quiet, both with this podcast and indeed over at Quantum Plant Healing for a few weeks, and we'll get into a few of the details around that. But for sure, this is a big week. Today is May the 1st. It is Beltane, so Beltane blessings to everybody. Yay! And I was looping back to one of the podcasts we did last year where we featured Beltane and our Beltane queen, which is Lady Hawthorn. So we're perhaps going to try and bring her in later to really open up that heart, because the heart is a key part of the process that we're all in right now. And for anyone who's been looking at the astrology or really just living the energies of the last few weeks, I'm sure that we've all had some ups and downs, to say the least. And the energy is coming to what I believe, and many astrologers, as a peak or a climax this week with the second of the eclipses, the lunar full moon eclipse of Scorpio. And perhaps we can get into some of the energies, but for sure, where would you like to start, bro? We did kind of pencil this particular episode, and we've even been talking for 45 minutes beforehand about whether we were going to do it, because the internet and the energies were kind of strong. But we did jokingly call this the Coronation special due to our love of the monarchy. So perhaps we could take an irreverent look at what the hell is going on with that, and why is it even happening? What do you think, bro? Where would you like to start?
I think that's entirely appropriate to begin with. I mean, we've already got a new king, but it's a bit like when somebody gives you your birthday present before it's actually your birthday. You know what I mean? We've got the coronation coming up. That will be the officially we will then have a king. We haven't had a king for a few decades now. I think we all ought to be very excited about that, don't you? But the whole thing is completely...
bro. I can't contain my enthusiasm for the whole piece.
Exactly. But the whole thing has sort of taken me by surprise in a way, because I had no idea it was happening. The date of the coronation, everything. I knew there would be one, but I had nothing in my sphere. I have to say that I've said this before, and not through not wanting to so much as through just being too busy and being preoccupied with other things in my own life, which I think are more important than, who sits on the throne. And we've done that one before with the previous incumbent, of course, the throne. And I don't really care, to be perfectly honest with you, and so it hasn't really been anything I paid much attention to. But then it started to impinge, because it turns out I was supposed to be working on the day that this happens. In point of fact, my partner is going to work for me on that day, but it still started. I was getting people emailing me saying, are we still going ahead with the class on the 6th of May, because it's the coronation? And other patients of mine emailing me and saying, oh, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Opportunity for what? Exactly. Opportunity to stand in a crowd and wait while a golden carriage floats by. Opportunity to spend the day in watching the whole bloody thing on television. What's it an opportunity for? Exactly. You're not going to get to shake his hand. You're not going to get to, nothing meaningful is particularly going to happen, other than that whatever sort of drama you're kind of creating inside your own head about it. So when I sort of thought, oh my God, my main thought about it was, oh, I almost swore then, but family show and all of that. Oh bother. It seems like it might actually disrupt my life a bit, which I really can't be doing with. Although there are many things that are disrupting life at the moment. We might talk about the operations of the current administration in the UK, and the way that they, for the last 5 months now, have failed to resolve the conflicts that they've got in the workforce with the rail workers and the nurses, and that's all still going on. I can't believe it. 5 or 6 months down the line, and we're still doing with all of that. But never mind, guys. We've got a new shiny king, and then we've got to swear allegiance to the king.
I could swear.
I'm okay with the swearing. I'm okay with the swearing for sure, but basically no. That's all I've really got to say. No, it is I don't know.
I agree.
You
So
know,
the question then becomes, why are we opening our show talking about this? Because there is definitely more to this that I want to say, but I totally
yeah.
am in agreement with all of what you've said. Hashtag nothing meaningful, hashtag nothing to see here, hashtag not my king, hashtag not anybody's king, actually, because if we really delve into the logistics and the lineages, these people are fakers. It's out there saying it is official. This lineage of monarchy is not actually an official monarchy in British history, nor is this an official government. And for those of you who understand about maritime law and about common law and understand about the Civil War and about the re-establishment of the monarchy post Cromwell's exploits, you'll start to understand that this is a sham operation that we've been somewhat held under for the last 450 odd years. So big statement, probably going to get me in a little bit of trouble. Do I give a shit? No.
No.
That's that point now. So this may be a going down with all guns blazing kind of a show. We don't know yet. We'll see how it pans out over the next 45 minutes. But for sure, let's get into a few of the details here, bro. And let's literally pick this thing apart, which is, I think, what it deserves, because it's like a corpse, right? Or a carcass that needs to be picked apart.
Well, I think it's, my take on that is, you said, he's not a legitimate king. My take on that is no king is legitimate. If, in a tribal situation, a hero arises and says, right, I will lead you to victory. I will establish safe territory for you. I will look after you in particular ways. Then, people follow him. I believe in leadership. I believe in decision making at a fundamental level that we should.
Essential.
We absolutely, and we should honor our decision makers, and that's what I call them basically. And if they don't make good decisions, we should depose them immediately. This lot, I can't even remember the last time any of them made a good decision, or why we would ever give them any power whatsoever. But that's, the monarchy, not just in this country, but wherever you find it in the world, is just a bunch of, parasites as far as I can see, because they are somehow, they're living the life. I'm sure they'll tell you that their life is very hard and they're devoted to charity and all of that stuff. But actually, when it comes right down to it, they're sitting on a pile of gold. They're like, they are like the sort of the archetypal image of the not very nice reptilian sitting on a pile of a hoard of gold.
Hold on, bro. You're starting to sound like David Icke. Talking about the monarchy's reptilians.
I didn't say they were reptilians. I'm not. I did occasionally refer to Her Majesty as Elizabeth, but
good one, dude. Well, you know what? David Icke probably was talking a lot of sense. I have met the guy, nice guy actually.
I have a good feeling about David actually. Mind you, I did read his latest book, The Trap, and I have a few differences of opinion with that. But that's maybe for another time.
Yeah, I mean, there are many good people out there, but I don't necessarily agree 100% with everything that they've said, or even the way that it's been delivered. And for sure, I would perhaps have some issues around that with good old David. But so let's take into account some of what he's shared over the years about these people and what may or may not have been going on in the background. And first of all, I want to posit the idea that is the dude that is strolling around currently known as Charlie. Is it really Charlie? Because he looks a lot different to the Charlie that we were seeing a year or two ago. And I'm wondering, given the amount of footage that has been appearing of people wearing masks, which includes many of the major players, including good old Uncle Joe and a number of others, and maybe you've seen some of these footages that have been caught of people like scratching their neck and the sort of the wrinkle of the mask being exposed. So the big question I think that is coming to humanity is, actually, how many of the people that we see on the screen or in positions of supposed power are even those people? And in fact, have they ever been? Are we dealing with actors? Are we dealing with clones? What the hell is going on, bro? Do you have any ideas about this?
Well, not really. I mean, I've watched these clips and seen these posts and watched with sort of, without judging, without being able really to form an opinion. The idea that many of the sort of so-called leading figures in our world have actually now been dealt with and replaced by actors, puppets, etc., is not a new one to me. I've been sort of watching that over the last, I suppose,
Simpsons cartoon, for Christ's sake.
Sorry. The Simpsons, exactly. I mean, it seems it's in the public domain and it's presented as a bit of a joke, but
Right.
Actually, what if it's true? I don't know. All I can say is with regard to Charlie Boy, I did meet him twice and had sort of what passed for a conversation a couple of times with him. And
Wow.
I've been in his house, or what used to be his house, which is St. James's Palace. I shouldn't probably admit to too much of this, but in the course of
Dangerous talk,
defending.
buddy. Dangerous talk.
Well, I know. I mean, I was, in the name of defending herbal medicine, of which he professed to be something of a champion. I was invited to a few events, and it was, I mean, it was distinctly strange. I mean, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. You don't refuse an invitation to the palace, even if it's the minor palace rather than the major palace. But I couldn't contain my curiosity about it all. But I come away, he was strange. I mean, but they would be. I mean, if you've been brought up like that, you would be strange. I think, and
I
he's
suspect
a
the reason for
strange.
the strangeness is not just the upbringing, dude. I suspect it could be
That
down
you
to
mean,
other
well,
things.
absolutely. I can fully take that on. Absolutely. All I know is there's a rather nice cartoon that appeared on Facebook, which was footage of him getting a little bit irate at having to sign stuff on his first day as king. And there
Great.
was a kind of a voiceover which was not obviously belonging to the original video, which I found absolutely killingly funny. I don't know whether you saw that one. He was
I think you
basically
even
saying,
sent it to
"Why
me.
should I have to do?" Yes, he said, "I shouldn't have to do this. I'm the fucking king." And I thought, well, that kind of says it all in a way. Why would anybody really ever want to do that job? And it really quite. I have a big question about this in terms of the kind of human being, if they are. I mean, okay, let's go into Johnny Rotten, right? While we're on the subject,
I know
do you know
this is one that we
John
talked about
Lydon?
before, right? The God Save
Yeah,
the
no,
Queen.
but there's
Yeah,
more.
let's get
There's
into it.
more. There's more. Johnny Rotten has been defending the royalty against Prince Harry. Now and he actually said, "Oh, they're just human beings." He was the person who said, "God save the Queen, she ain't no human being." So it's just like the whole thing is completely ridiculous. And you've got, the king or the arch hero of punk, the guy who sort of flung everything into chaos in the music industry in the 1970s, now resolutely joining the ranks of the conservative, not to say Tory, because he is a Tory actually, but the establishment. And you couldn't make it up, or could you? Or maybe Johnny Rotten has been replaced by an actor as well.
So let's get into Johnny Rotten, otherwise known as John Lydon, right? Who did, I think, possibly one of the most amazing tracks of my youth era, which was a track with Left Field called "Open Up." Part of the amazing leftism album that Left Field put out. And if you listen to that tune again, which I have quite a lot recently, it's an incantation. And words are burn Hollywood, burn since we found down
absolutely.
To So what's going on here inside the Sex Pistols? Do we have a sort of a split in ideology? Because, I mean, Lydon is still considered to be a national hero. Sid Vicious, on the other hand, perhaps not so much, especially now after what you've shared.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Sid was one of the sort of, I regard Sid, rightly or wrongly, as a casualty of the machine, of the sort of publicity machine, and of and obviously the use of very hard and undesirable pharmaceutical substances, which eventually spelled his demise. And arguably, I don't know, I don't want to badmouth anybody I didn't actually know, but Nancy Spungen wasn't perhaps the nicest person that you could ever hope to meet. But Sid always struck me as being quite sweet in a way. I probably got completely the wrong idea, but I think he was not well regarded as a musician. They took the piss out of him massively in the band because he couldn't play, or when you listen to the stuff back. Well, I thought that was the whole point of punk, that you couldn't play your instruments. And the guitarist, particularly, I can't remember his name now, who's doing quite well, doing podcasts in America, trading off his former connection with the band, who somehow now seems to regard himself as a highly accomplished musician, where there was this whole sort of narrative about the Sex Pistols with, they're so refreshing, they can't play their instruments, they shout and swear, and they do everything to upset the establishment. And when I actually look at it, I mean, Sid in a way got out, he got out of the whole thing, but maybe he's the one that if he had stayed in might have been a little bit real. in a sense, because I can't see it the others are, and I don't know what's happened to John Lydon. I mean, bless him, he is. I know that he is, you know, look, he's a carer for his wife who has Alzheimer's. I don't even know whether she's still alive, and I wouldn't want to badmouth anybody. I mean, I love some of his work. I bought the Metal Box LP when it first came out. You know, the whole thing, the four vinyl discs literally in a metal box. And somebody nicked it off me when I was a load of punks I was living with nicked it off me, and I went out and bought it again when it came out in CD form. So, and I still listen to some of that, you know, so I'm actually a fan, but I cannot understand what on earth he is doing, interjecting into debates over the royalty when, you know, is he trying to atone for the fact that he must have pissed them off mightily with God Save the Queen?
I have a different take on this, bro. I have a very different take based on what I've been observing in modern pop culture, and particularly some of the more satanically infused artists, of which there are a lot now, and a lot of them have been taken down. As we've talked about previously, some of them had even been possibly linked with trafficking through their children charities, etc., etc. And what we've always perceived as being anti-establishment, as we're now understanding, has really been an inserted narrative through the whole woke agenda, which seems anti-establishment, seems very left, seems very liberal, but actually is just a load of big BS. And I'm wondering whether the Sex Pistols were one of the early incarnations of this type of skullduggery. Because what's also interesting is that the Sex Pistols were the first people that outed Savile on TV. They called him out back in the 70s, and the guy was allowed to maraud around for another 20-something years or more even. And so there are many incongruences here with the Pistols. So they must have obviously been privy to that information. The question then becomes how. Maybe some of them were even possibly attempted to be groomed or whatever. And the fact that Sid can't sing is not really, you know, he's very much in line with most modern pop artists, I think, who can't play instruments.
Nothing new there,
Nothing new there, but it also makes me wonder this whole idea of, you know, when I listen to some of the other music from the 80s, it is very melodic, is very much with musicians who could sing and play instruments. And then we fast forward to the modern pop world, and much as there is a lot of music that I like, including some pop music, a lot of it actually is really, really poor quality. And there's always been poor pop. That's not anything new either. But what's really become apparent to me over the last 6 months is that anyone who's allowed, and I use that word deliberately, to be famous in the Hollywood or pop careers really has already been got.
I totally, I mean, you say it's a different take. I mean, I think I was kind of working around saying something the same, because the only way you can resolve these apparent contradictions is to come up with a unifying theory, and that would seem to be a good one to me. I mean, I do notice this. I could point at many people who I previously admired and followed, who I now wouldn't touch with a barge pole, you know.
And I've been sort of doing a who's who over the last 6 months, digging a little deeper into people that I had suspicions about. And as it turns out, you don't have to dig very far to find out an awful lot of dirt about most of the people that you consider to be the biggest pop stars in the world, or indeed anyone in Hollywood. I mean, it's almost to the point that I can't look at any of the information anymore, because what I've come to realize is the illusion that we have all been force-fed basically a bunch of creations with a lot of inverted energy, whether it's through the pop music, and for sure Our Lady Madonna, who's probably one of the most inverted pop stars, really, I think, of the last 20 years, all of which we thought was great when she was doing lots of things against the church and being super liberal and showing off as much of herself as she could, which pretty much was everything at one point. And we all thought that was kind of cool because it was rebellious and it was Madonna. But as it turns out, it's actually all part of a much bigger agenda, which we're now really seeing the effects of. And so I think that the big motif that we're pointing here to, looping back to the coronation, is that is anything that we perceive, is it really what we thought it was or is? And is that maybe the point of what the big disclosures and revelations are now really showing us? And again, anyone who says that they're waiting for the disclosures obviously is waiting at an underground station that's been closed for a decade, because the trains have been going through repeatedly with all of the information. Everything is out there. And again, perhaps we're on our 30th anniversary edition today of Web of Wyrd. We are skirting a bit close to the wind, but I think like a lot of the population, we both have said, you know what, F you, we've had enough and we don't care anymore, because somebody needs to start speaking out. And for sure, many people have been speaking out and also getting into trouble for it. But maybe this is also a little bit of a lead into something else I wanted to talk about today, which is the takedown of the media. And the head of the BBC, the chairman, resigning, Tucker Carlson leaving Fox News, and maybe people on the other side of the pond are not so familiar with Tucker, but living on this side of the pond over the last 18 months, I've become much more aware of what's going on in American media and politics. And Tucker Carlson is probably one of the more interesting characters that's been disclosing a lot, not least of all about the January 6th so-called riots and the QAnon shaman. Did you manage to clock into any of that piece, bro?
I didn't. I am aware of Tucker Carlson, and you know, I've seen various posts involving him, and I thought this guy is dangerous in the right way.
In the right way,
without really having ever really watched a program as such. I wasn't aware of the standing down of the chairman of the BBC. You'll have to bring me up to speed about that. But no, okay. The brief answer to that is no. I haven't clocked into these things at all. So I'm all agog. Tell me more.
Pray let me enlighten you a little bit from my own limited.
Yeah.
So yes, the chairman of the BBC resigned, I think, 2 or 3 days ago after really being put to task. And I'm sure this is not the most onerous of the things that he's probably guilty of, but the helping of the loan, the £800,000 loan to our good old friend Blojo, who seems to have his fingers in all of these kinds of dirty pies all over the place. So this is not a new piece of information. This was already in the public awareness, I think, 6 or 7 months ago. But like many people, including Mistrust, who we're going to get to in a minute, who's also been caught, not wouldn't exactly say with her pants down, he's not publicly, but has certainly been proven to be a thief along with a bunch.
That would have been more interesting.
Yeah, so why are these people being taken down for what seem like fairly nominal actions compared to what they may have done? And bearing in mind what we have discussed about Mistrust and the Nord Stream pipelines in the past, the stealing of slippers and dressing gowns from the residence that she was using during her brief tenure as Prime Minister last year has blown up in her face in the form of, I think, a £12,000 bill, which she's been issued with, for the removal of the slippers and dressing gown and the innumerable parties that were somewhat being disguised as government get-togethers. So that's another story. We'll come to that one in a minute. But the BBC
Partygate.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, another version of Partygate, really, which also never really came to any sort of justifiable conclusion.
No.
But this is where things start to get interesting. So I'm going to loop across to the US side of things a minute. So one of the things that Tucker Carlson, along with Matt Taibbi and all of the folks over at Twitter, led by brand Elon Musk, who's proven to be quite an entertaining character. The Musketeer has returned, possibly as one of the light. I'm actually pretty sure that it's not Elon that we're seeing on TV, but another version of Elon. But the brand Elon Musk that took over Twitter has made a huge difference and made a crack in the media coverage that allowed the floodgates to open and to put the Democrats in the US firmly on squeaky bum time, as the whole debacle with Melvin Bragg and the indictment of the former president, etc. It's been an absolute comedy show for anyone who's been following the US side of things, but also deeply intriguing on other levels. And Tucker somehow through Twitter managed to, I think, grab a bunch of footage that shows the so-called QAnon shaman, one of the ringleaders of this insurgence that fueled the Jan 6th riot, actually being shown around prior to the insurgency by the security guards, full kind of guided tour in his outfit, being shown every part of the room, or all of the rooms, which were then subsequently invaded. So one has to ask why the security guards were happily showing around this dude fully dressed up in the weirdest of outfits prior to this so-called insurgency, of which he was then supposedly one of the ringleaders. Something doesn't quite stack up. So Tucker showed all of this footage on Fox News, and Fox, not one of my favorite channels really from previous experiences, has been one of the more interesting channels for some of the more disclosure-led types of information to come out through. If you watch MSNBC or CNN or any of the MSMs, you'll just get the same tired old Democrat claptrap pushing all of the wrong kinds of agendas about all of the things that probably wind us all up to do with the Ukraine and transgenderism, and a whole bunch of other more inverted, shall we say, policies. Fox, on the other hand, mostly through Tucker, hadn't been following that particular sort of rhetoric, much more on the sort of the pro-Republican side, as they always have been. And so Tucker had been given a fair amount of space to share his own thoughts. Possibly even working in conjunction with Mr. Trump. Those guys seem to be good friends. We don't know fully the backdrop, but Tucker, I think, resigned this week from Fox. So the general reading this side of the pond is that he's done his job and he's now being released from his service that he was doing for the light in Fox News. And now that all of the MSMs are all about to go, which is why the likes of the BBC chairman has had to step down, because the takeover of the media is almost done. So that's a very potted version of how I understand.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, and it needed to be done.
For sure.
I mean, you know, it's the big fly in the whole ointment, isn't it? I mean, there was another incident which I quickly sent out to you. I don't know whether you had time to look into it, which was about and this is another topic that we sort of thought we might tackle today, which is about medication of a certain kind, you know, post-event medication, if we can call it that, and how stories are now beginning to appear about people who didn't do quite so well on that medication, not just that it didn't work, which is a you know, a whole story in itself, but that they actually got damaged by it. And some people actually died, and there's a lot of stuff coming out about that at the moment. But in particular, there was a whole item about compensation, basically, and a lawyer asking people to come forward if they felt that they had a case. And it was on a regional BBC program called BBC North, and I was literally, I saw it, I heard it, and I thought, blimey, this is really now going to go big. But as I was trying to share it, in fact, I was trying to share it to you, bro, and I eventually did. But as I was trying to share it, it disappeared just flat. And another person who was on the thread, because this was posted by a mutual friend, also had exactly the same experience. She was trying to share it at the same time as I, and she just said the same thing happened. It just vanished completely. And I thought, well, what's going on there? Is it the BBC, you know, buckling down or kind of retrenching on something? Or is it that actually we're not ready to put this out yet, but well done for noticing it? Or what exactly is the story there? Because it seems like the same old censorship. Yeah. And yet it was interesting to me. That cannot have been a mistake. It cannot have been a mistake that it ended, that it was reported in the first place, unless some runaway, you know, kind of maverick presenter decided to just run the story. And what the hell? Be interesting to find out actually whether he's still in post.
Here's an interesting thought off the back of that, and I think one that is going to be very much in the public awareness, if not from this week onwards. And I do perceive this week to be a major turning point with the astrology and the eclipse that's coming on Friday. But here's a point. So for those of us who are still in the game, and I would hope that that's most of our listeners and who have a fair idea of where we're coming from with most of our shows, that there has been a huge hoax played on the global population over the last few years, and not a very nice one, of which the medical profession largely and the media profession almost completely have been complicit in. Yeah. And what I'm perceiving now is that behind the scenes, that everybody is being made to realize that they maybe either unconsciously or consciously participated in this whole very unpleasant hoax. And perhaps this choice point is forcing people to choose whether they acknowledge, and some of the people who've had to resign, including some journalists, have now come out and admitted and apologized that maybe they got things wrong, or that they were forced to say certain things in line with the policies of the media stations that they were working for. And of course, let's not forget the good old friends who are currently on strike, actually, or some of them, who are happy to receive the applause every night of the general population of Britain, whilst they TikToked and danced their way through empty wards, which supposedly were full during the lockdown in 2020. Now, I don't want to point the finger at anyone particularly within the medical profession, but for sure, hundreds of thousands of people were very aware that their wards were empty, whilst the media in Britain was telling everybody that they were being overrun. anybody who went to a hospital during 2020 would have been somewhat overwhelmed by the lack of activity at any of these major incident centres. So one has to wonder, in the great scheme of the unfolding and the revealing, where do all of the medical professionals and media people who pushed the medications, which are now being revealed to be utterly not anything that they ever said, stand in this whole picture? And is this part of the takedown of the media and the great revealing, is the removal of the propaganda machine?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just have to say about that. I really hope that that's what this is, because I think without the propaganda machine, that hoax could not have been perpetrated. And with honest, straightforward reporting, more people might have seen through it right from the start. That didn't, and that to me, you know, when I saw that particular post, the one that I just spoke about, my thought was, it's not just the, you know, the companies who are making the medications that need to be sued. It's actually everyone who promoted it, everyone who sold it to the public in the way that it was done, and harassed, harangued, and threatened,
silenced.
Silenced, etc. But you know, threatening people with dire consequences through not doing it. You can't travel, you can't be free anymore, you can't have a job, you can't go anywhere, you know, you'll not be welcome in society at large, was one of the biggest. It was criminal. I actually said at the time, very early days, I remember I was speaking to my father, and he actually said, "What, you're not going to take the medication?" I said, "No, why would I?" I said, in my view, I said, a huge evil is about to be perpetrated upon humankind on this planet, and that, in fact, I stick to that, and everything I've seen since has vindicated that, and a lot of people out there saying that right now.
Well, I mean, this is, you know, for me and you who've talked about this all the way through, and for many of our friends and peers in our kind of, I guess, part of the global world's population spectrum, everything that's being revealed now is sort of what we already knew pretty early on in the piece. And we sort of had to wait for 2.5 years for the rest of the population to try and catch up, which has been frustrating at times. But I just want to add in another piece here, which kind of adds to this, which I saw yesterday from Australia, is that anyone who was fined during the lockdown has had all of their fines returned to them, because those fines were actually ruled by a Supreme Court in Australia, I believe, as being illegal.
Yeah, and Australia is a really interesting case in the whole thing, actually, because they were absolutely draconian towards their citizens. What amongst the most fascist sort of regimes in the entire world, and they are experiencing something like something between 20 and 30% increase in the death rate in Australia at the moment. I haven't checked that out, by the way, but that's a report that I saw earlier today.
Well, I mean, I think the good thing is that these rulings, and of course there are many things going on all over the place. I mean, anyone who wants to find out what's going on, the information is out there. It's really not that difficult. You just have to put time and intention and attention to it. For sure, Telegram has been a major vehicle, I think, for a lot of information to be revealed, and increasingly the likes of Rumble and BitChute also have finally managed to perhaps create alternative platforms to the one that we use, which is still kind of going through a process, I believe, and is still, I think, is still serving an important function. But as always, we have to be very careful about what we say. But I just want to loop back to what you said about the, you know, the sort of the piece of the last few years. It was only possible through the media and through the medical establishment's complicity. It was only possible to pull it off through that, and to convince everybody through the science. Our good old friends, Professor Chris Whitty, and the other guy who used to stand up there with our friend Hansok, who of course is also up to his eyeball.
He is up to his bollocks in it, isn't he? Excuse me.
Yes, I think fresh off his celebrity status, and I'm a celebrity, get me the F out of here. He got the F out of that, and he's now landed himself in a load of deep doo-doo. I don't think the
midazolam thing is not going to go away, basically.
No, and of course, in the US, it was, I think, called remdesivir equivalent. And so, yeah, there's all of these dirty stories, and they were all being tracked all the way through 2020. Michael Lobernacia was one of the guys that was really going after what he called the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which was Hansok, Whitty, Valance, and I think Niall Ferguson, a very odious guy.
Neil Ferguson, yeah.
Who's very, very basic programming, which was like something out of a GCSE I think, essay or something that he'd written many years ago, where they based the whole premise of the hoax on that very, very defunct and basically completely useless data.
The thing about that is he had previous, didn't he? I mean, he'd done some ridiculous thing over foot and mouth. He'd done the same thing. He massively overacted the whole thing, resulted in the slaughter of thousands of animals. Completely unnecessary.
So, you know, these are all things from the dim and distant memory of 2020 that many people probably have either had medicated out of them or forgotten about. But for those of us that do remember the odious energies of 2020 and the initial lockdowns and the deep psyops that was put on everybody during that period, and I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I was in Britain during that period, and I remember it very succinctly because I was working with my medicines to investigate what the hell was going on in the astral planes, and it was really quite unpleasant. For those of us that tend to be more multidimensional, some of the astral energies of 2020 and 21 were really quite, well, you called it, but I think evil, really. But also, you know, and just I want to add this in as a counterpoint to our haranguing of what's been going on over the last. We're definitely in a flow this episode, bro, about all of this. So we're probably going to end up with a big ban, but hopefully we're being.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, you know, if the MSN are being taken down, then we may just survive with this.
We may just survive, but you know, just to add in another little sort of counterpoint to all of this is that humanity was stuck prior to 2020, and certainly for me, I'd seen the light dimming out of humanity probably for the previous decade. I'd seen it very strongly in Britain, the greying of everything, the homogenization of even the great city of London had lost its identity, had become very sterile. And I was just like, this is humanity's losing its soul, it's losing its spirit, and seems unable to break free of the pub holiday restaurant cycle that they've been utterly sold into. And so on the other hand, I see that the great story of the last 3 years was actually also a mechanism by which the light was happy to use to try and wake people up through creating choice points. And I you know, I always try to take the eagle's perch perspective on everything these days. And even if something seems really, really bad, you know, as one of my meditations, I see Bill Gates as the greatest hero on planet Earth through his medications and his desire to wake everybody up. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily true. And certainly recent revelations about his friendship with Epstein, a fellow philanthropist, as this article painted this.
Yeah, this is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I totally get where you're coming from with that in a kind of non-dualistic sense. We come down to duality. We adopt our personae, but with the adoption of a persona like Bill Gates or Tony Fauci or Matt Hancock or, you know, any of these other clowns that we love to put up on a pedestal. There's a whole thing that comes with that. They can't just be, oh, they're really good guys, but they're just, you know, taking this on for us sort of thing. They're being heroes, but they're not. They are taking it on for us at some level. At some level, there's an interesting passage in one of the Seth books where he said, yeah, some people are going to come and they're really going to press, you know, in the next few years, they're really going to press your buttons. They're there to do that. They're there to stimulate you into resistance, into rebellion. And that's what these guys are. But unfortunately, when they do that, they also take on a crap personality that forces them to do things that are really not very nice. So in other words, they've got to be authentic. So they've got really to be bad guys. They can't just pretend to be bad guys. On the earth plane, they are bad guys. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, would it?
Well, no, it wouldn't. And I think this is an interesting sort of point that I'm certainly coming to my own journey, which is actually really breaking down my sense of self. And certainly we were talking about at the beginning, the last few weeks of sort of enforced almost self-isolation has been essential to go deeply inwards and bless our wonderful elder and colleague, Pam Gregory, who's been saying the same thing over and over. You've got to create the space, because New Earth is not something that's going to come to you. It's something that's in you, and you have to go inside and find it, because frequency. And I see many people, unfortunately, sat back going, well, when are the disclosures going to happen? When is it all going to happen? When is New Earth going to arrive? And it's like, it's been here, actually, since winter solstice of 2021, and been forming with the very, I think, adept abilities of many more awake beings on the planet who've been crafting what New Earth looks like through our minds, through our inner space, with the assistance of higher beings, but also I want to throw in an idea with the assistance of our future selves.
Absolutely.
Time travelers, avataring back into this reality to assist us in our 3D bodies right now as another emanation of our oversoul to assist us in this process, which is why our intuition is always 100% correct, because it's just our higher self telling us about something that it already knows about. Interesting thought, huh?
Yeah, I'm kind of really down with that, because I think that, you know, I mean, when you get into the perspective that past, present, and future at a certain level don't exist anyway, it's all simultaneous.
Right.
I think what's happening, I've said this before, I think, you know, I get the very, very strong sense that the partitions that have been erected to separate past from present and present from future, and the 3D realm from 4D and 5D, etc. All of these are coming down, and there's a huge interest now in psychic studies, for example, and people who want to sort of start to explore, really seriously explore the techniques of interdimensional travel, and perhaps even time travel experiments, working with your own timeline, for example, which are perfectly possible and and should be taught as a healing modality.
I think me and you have both been doing it, bro, in our healing work. Like when we do soul retrievals and we time travel, we are going into another timeline continuum. And for the beings that are actually present in the 3D in that timeline continuum, and they see beings like us avataring in from the future to do healing work, then how the hell does that look?
Yeah. I'm sure it looks very strange, but I think we're welcomed at the same time. You know, I think there's the structure that it's almost like you can't ever entirely do without some structure,
right?
But it's time for the structure that has pertained for the last, I don't even know how many thousand years. Some people would say 75,000, or some people would say 100,000 or 200,000. I don't know, but it's changing. It's time for it to change. It's time for it to collapse. And we are getting a new structure. I think that, you know, it's probably not realistic to say there will be no structure, but it's a new structure, and it will be more permissive, and it will be more egalitarian. It will take down the need for hierarchy, I think. And this is why we're talking about kings and things. That's why I say no king is legitimate, because you know, amongst human beings, we're all immortal souls. We cannot be, one cannot be higher than another.
Right.
So
no, I agree with you, and I think that maybe this is reflected by the astrology of Saturn moving into Pisces, and what we've come to understand, and this particularly came through on the amazing nettle immersion. So much of that information, bro, has been mind-blowing, you know. And I think that probably one of the most interesting things that came through about this, and the reason I'm sharing it is because it's to do with water, is the cleanliness of our inner waters is essential for the journey to the higher mind, multi-dimensional consciousness. Because we came back from a recent trip to Texas and bought a bunch of water filtering equipment, started filtering our tap water, then took the filtered water from the taps here, which is the tap water, you know, from our local environment, put it through a distillation machine after it had already been filtered for a whole bunch of minerals. And you should see the amount of crap that came out. Not least of all bits of graphene, very clearly graphene, and a whole bunch of horrible white fluoride gunk.
Yeah.
And since we've been drinking the distilled water, Jesus, what a difference. I feel like my whole body's pinging in a way that it wasn't able to before. And, you know, we've also been working with the Mayan wave spells. And just out of curiosity, the one that starts on the May the 4th is called the Magnetic Human, which is about what are we attracting to ourselves, either high frequency stuff or low frequency stuff. But for sure, if we're still carrying that horrible graphene, and even Magenta Pixie, I think in that one of her videos that she did recently referred to it in the channeling, that the world cannot progress until the black toxic sludge has been removed. So I kind of think that is the graphene, and we're understanding more and more about all of this. But, you know, the need for structure, Saturn, Chronos, time, is going to change as time passes through water. How does time manage in the fluidity of the ocean of consciousness, or Pisces? Well, it has to somehow, but I believe it's through the restructuring or the balancing of the waters within us that we create the Saturn within ourselves, through the restructuring of our waters, which allows a much more multi-dimensional channel and experience to unfold in a constant moment by moment experience, as me and you, I think, have been experiencing now for a few weeks, and listening to other people talking on their channels, understanding that many people have had a big shift over the last few weeks, and understanding that if it wasn't for the plants, we probably wouldn't be in such great shape. Nature is the key, and many interesting things have come to me about that for future podcasts. But the return to nature is a return to ourselves. And I think that the more we understand that nature is a self-regenerating, self-replenishing system, if left to its natural perfection, of which humans are an intricate part, then we can understand that we too can be exactly the same.
Aho, and I want to pick that's a soundbite, bro. The return to nature is the return to ourselves.
Hashtag,
and
I'm hashtagging it, claiming it.
This is absolutely hashtag it, and folks out there, just remember that, because it's so important. This is what I teach pretty much every day in the classroom. It's one of my guiding principles and always has been. And this idea you get from some places that nature is somehow seeking to annihilate us, and nature hates us, and the plants are kind of, getting their own back and taking their revenge on us is bullshit, I'm afraid. As soon as you turn around and you embrace nature, it will support you, it will love you, it will embrace you. And we need to remember that it is the only salvation, actually, on this level, on this planet, and new earth as well. Well, whatever that eventually turns out to be, it cannot be in opposition to or exploitation of nature, as has been the case for the last God knows how many 100 years. So that is a big change. That is a big focus for everybody who's interested in this work.
And, just to throw out a crazy thought, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and even sharing it in various ways. I have the perception that the medicine plants particularly, but I think all plants in somehow are realized beings, what we might call sort of Buddha mind or bodhisattvas. And I started to think about this a bit more, and I was like, well, who designed the human interfacing, otherwise known as the body, so that it has cannabinoid receptors, it has caffeine receptors, exactly. It has nicotine receptors. I'm like, hold on a second. It's like we've been intricately designed by some sort of intelligence to be completely pluggable in to the natural environment.
We're hardwired, bro. We're hardwired into it. Absolutely.
Hardwired to receive these impulses from these incredible beings, otherwise manifesting as tobacco and coffee and cacao and all kinds of other stuff, right? So then I got to thinking about this a bit more, and I started to postulate to myself, maybe, you think about how the natural world is the binding, terraforming principle that we live within. And let's think that maybe plants are ascended human minds, such as a Buddha mind, who has gone into the infinite nature of all that is and has decided to come back as a plant being to help the binding of this terraforming world that we're in. So maybe plants, and there's even a saying that the soul journey of a human is to become a tree. Maybe a tree is elevated higher human consciousness returned to assist us in our evolution.
Well, there are some thoughts for naught. Brilliant. I don't know anything is possible. I mean, it overturns the usual narratives. A lot of people are going to say, "Oh no, no." I mean, you listen to some of the stuff that's out there. No. The plants are way down the evolutionary scale. I personally, I'm down with perspectivism, and perspectivism comes out of ethnographic and ethnomedical or ethnobotanical research in the South American indigenous populations. The sort of Amazon forest plant users there, whom you and I know very well. And there's a guy who's written a lot about that, called Eduardo de Viveiro Castro. Have you heard of this guy? He's written a whole load on perspectivism, and he wrote a book called Cannibal Metaphysics, and all about basically how everybody eats each other, and we should
including nature.
Yeah, exactly. And but perspectivism basically sees every species or every entity perceives the world from its own perspective. So a jaguar is human, and a human is a jaguar, and etc., etc. And I think there's some truth in this, and because I really like the way that it completely levels out the whole field. There's no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy of evolution. You choose what you might choose to come as a tree for a holiday or something. You might say, oh, that'd be good. Take 100 years off and become an oak tree or whatever. I don't think there's a hierarchy of living beings. So yeah.
And I think that's a really, important point, is that whoever, whatever created the natural cycle, and we only really have the earthly realm currently in our awareness to go on. But when we look at it, and I've been doing this a lot over the last few weeks during this sort of downtime and in time, is just to sit in nature and just look constantly at the fractalness of it all, and understand that as a fractal being in that fractal system, that I have a responsibility to play out from my fractal center, which is my heart chakra, everything, so that the rest of the fractal that I'm living in is in coherence, whether it's my living space, my local town, my local perception of where I live, my country, everything, the world. If we start to adopt that sense of fractal being, and adopting ourselves as the center of our own fractal being, that everything that we experience fractals out from that, and we all do that, holy shit, what might the world look like?
Of course, you have been taking far too many fungi, bro, haven't you?
Actually, you know what? Of course, I love the fungi. I'm certainly not shy to talk about that, or indeed my other plant friends. But to be honest, I haven't wanted to travel the astral planes too much, which is where the fungi normally take me, because it's been a bit messy. But what the fungi are absolutely amazing at doing, and I think this is their prime function, really, in my experience, is they want to break down the sense of self. And we talked about this, I think, on recent calls over at QPH, is like, how much have we all been identifying through our wounds? And if I remove my identity through my wounds, who am I without all of that stuff? And so I decided to embark on that process over the last 4 months, and it was quite a paradigm shifting experience, to not be living through the expression of my wounding from my life, or indeed my karma, but actually to say, you know what, I'm done with that. I don't want to identify with that anymore. Who am I without all of that? Quite a liberating experience. Definitely shook my foundations, and I had to sit with a lot of interesting and often challenging stuff. But boy, do I feel better for the process.
Yeah, I reckon that's the best kind of therapy.
So we're talking about nature, dude. I mean, there are many things on our list of potentials to talk about. I did have Sudan on the list, but I feel like we've passed that one by. I feel like that probably loops back to our friend Mr. Gates and the nature of the West in some of these more far-flung outposts where more nefarious activities can be hidden. So anyone who's been watching the somewhat, I think, embarrassingly hasty retreat that Britain seemed to take from Sudan, lauding it over everybody. There was quite a few complaints from other Western countries who seemed to be a little bit put out that we decided to commandeer the main airfield and extract, evacuate, who knows exactly what was going on, certain members of staff from let's just say a shit show that was about to unfold. And some of the interesting information coming through under the wire is, again, similar to what we've heard about our friends over in the Ukraine, to do with biolaboratories and the stashing of gold and possibly even the movement of people, who knows. So putting all of that to one side, I feel like this is a good moment to jump into nature. And today is, well, officially in the Gregorian calendar, what is known as Beltane or Beltane. So yes, Beltane blessings to everybody. And what would you like to talk about on this topic, and which of our favorite trees and plants is going to enter into the mix?
It's got to be Hawthorn. It is the Beltane plant. It's the one that we need to honor, and we need to check in with at this time. It's all about the heart, of course, in herbal medicine, as you've heard me say so often. It's our number one choice for treating the heart. There are other choices in other parts of the world. In TCM, for example, they value salvia, sage, red sage, Salvia miltioriza. In Ayurveda, they value Terminalia arjuna. Of course, they give it the name of one of the Sanskrit heroes, Arjuna. But in this country, in this part of the world, it's definitely the Lady Hawthorn. And I've been keeping an eye on her. We have a hawthorn tree, which we planted in our garden. And one of the things that's happening in the UK at the moment, people listening in the UK will probably back me up on this, is that everything is a bit behind. We've had a very, very cold. I mean, we've not really got out of single figures until this weekend. This weekend, there's been a spike here and there, but generally speaking, you give us one day of sunshine, the next day we're plunged back into cold and a lot of rain, a lot of wetness as well going on, and all the plants have been struggling with this. Now, this weekend, which is, by the way, bank holiday here, so everybody's sort of expecting great expectations. This has been raining today, but it's actually nice now. I've seen within the last week the blossoming of or the unfolding of leaves, particularly. The hawthorn was okay with the leaf, and we can see the buds just coming into into formation right now, but it's not well developed as it normally would be at this time of the year. So we're a little bit behind with the season, but it's really nice to see it coming on. And of course, the hawthorn is a plant that keeps us going all year round, in the sense that we have the flowers now that they will then eventually, and of course the young leaves and the flowering tops harvested just before the flowers go to seed are a very important remedy in herbal medicine. They are, and their content of certain things like the proanthocyanins, which are the antioxidant properties of the plant, are highest in those portions of the plant in the spring. So that's when we harvest them and we get our hawthorns together. As soon as those blossoms are out, we'll be out there taking our pick, or obviously leaving enough to turn into berries later in the year. So the hawthorn is a plant that just gives and gives, and there's no shortage of it in the British Isles. I mean, I think I remember last year on Beltane we talked about hawthorn. I was talking about, returning from the West Country along motorways lined from miles and miles and miles, scores of miles, with Mayflower hawthorn trees. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And we're actually going down to Somerset in a couple of weeks or so. And, one of the things I'm looking forward to there is getting close up with nature again, but also checking out the hawthorn in particular. It was in Somerset, after all. I think you were there, where I kind of had my encounter with hawthorn.
Yes, I remember that.
And it was, but it was something I've never forgotten, in the sense that it really did come to me as a very, very strong heart-centered experience. And I can't emphasize that too much. This is something which I think everybody needs to get into right now. So my sort of exhortation to anybody listening is to get some hawthorn essence or hawthorn tincture, or even just go out and look at the plant, sit underneath a tree, grab a few leaves maybe and chew them, or whatever you want to do to get up close and personal. Because this is a plant that I think can really start to open up the heart in a very meaningful way. I mean, I use it for heart, cardiovascular disease of all kinds, actually. I mean, it's applicable across the board. It's very amphoteric in that sense. It'll treat, opposite scenarios. It'll treat congestive heart disease, and it'll also treat coronary arterial disease. It will treat high blood pressure. It will also treat low blood pressure. It strengthens up the arteries. It strengthens up the heart muscle, etc. It cleanses the blood, normalizes levels of cholesterol, and so forth. So there isn't much in the cardiovascular system that hawthorn won't do, but the heart particularly is a massively symbolic organ for all of us. It stands in for everything that we really need to be getting away from right now. I've got a lot to say about this when it comes to the placement of the heart reflex in the iris. In iridology, we have a whole lecture on this, because it's a really, really important understanding. The heart actually contains or secretes hormones which actively counteract the stress hormones that we're normally subjected to. It's an active counteractivity to high blood pressure, to stress, and to this whole sort of stress-induced or stress-driven response to life. I've got to achieve, I've got to keep running, etc., etc. The answer to this all is to get back into nature, look at our plants, breathe with them, and start getting to know them a little better. What better time right now than to get out there and make contact with hawthorn?
Hi, brother. And I know this is a tree being that we both love a great deal in the Celtic traditions, very much known as the fairy queen, the Mayday queen, a tree. I mean, often a very small tree. I mean, I was blessed enough to live in Cymru or Wales for, as you know, many years, and the Brecon Beacons and in fact most of the mountainous area of Wales, which is most of the country, are covered in hawthorns. And I remember when my old teacher Pam Montgomery came over to run, I think the very first retreat we ever did with her was a hawthorn, and she was just blown away by the amount of hawthorn, because it was in full bloom, and the sort of the splash of white that you see across the countryside from the hawthorn blossoms is really something spectacular. And of course it immediately opens the heart to the beauty of nature. And then you get up close to some of these old hawthorn trees, and I remember picking blossoms for that retreat many moons ago, and encountering the smaller hawthorn trees, very, very big spikes, and they would be very much, you could take a little bit, but they would spike me when I took too much. And then there was the much bigger trees, still not that big compared to many other trees, where the blossom would be much more generous, the spikes would be a lot softer, and I wouldn't get spiked. And so I learned very quickly through that process about the need for respect when gathering medicine from trees and plants, and how to gauge which ones want to give you some, which ones don't, how much are they willing to give, and all of those things. So that was a beautiful entry point really into my plant spirit journey a long time ago now with hawthorn. And she stayed with me ever since. And, you know, she's very much to the fore at this time of year, when fertility and all of these great energies of sort of, you know, Mother Earth coming forth with the flowers, and even then the beginning of the fruits appearing here in Mexico. We already have that. And we're blessed enough actually to have quite a variety of different hawthorn species here, which I'm still exploring. And that's the beautiful thing about these families, as we've discovered through the immersions, right? You can connect into nettle, but as it turns out, there's like 20, 30 different nettle varieties, connect to elder, and of course we all know the main ones, but as it turns out, there's regional cousins. There's a Mexican elder, there's several Mexican hawthorns, and you know, and then you go to the Artemises, and there seems to be at least one different variety for almost every country on the planet or something, you know. So again, these wonderful kind of plant families make themselves available to us in their own terroirs all over the world. And I think that, you know, what you were saying, that this is a really important time to connect to the heart chakra and to the heart consciousness. And actually it's in our planning here to do a heart medicine immersion sometime in the coming months, possibly combining hawthorn with other heart medicines, such as San Pedro or Huachuma, which is a cactus, of course, from this part of the world and from the Andes. A cacao, also another amazing heart medicine. Who doesn't like chocolate? And even here, we've joked about this before, one of my favorite heart medicines of all is the Centauri or maguey cactus, from which we extract mezcal or mezcalito from the heart of that plant. An incredible cleansing tonic, really, that just opens up the heart and the third eye and crown chakras. And you know, when we drink these powerful spirits of cactus or plants, they're a bit like a tonic. And obviously, if we're going to knock 10 of them back, we're probably not doing it the right way. But if we drink some of these little, basically tinctures that can be 40, 45%, we're taking a full hit of the spirit of the tree or the plant consciously. And, you know, one of my favorite medicines of all was hawthorn brandy, you know, soaking the hawthorn berries in September in a beautiful cognac or armagnac, and then having a very sort of almost sweet appley kind of brandy that appears like 6 weeks later. And of course, it's not just about the alcohol in this line of work, but it's nice to have a medicine that tastes good once in a while. But I think what's important to focus on here, bro, is the connection between the heart chakra and the non-dual or fifth dimensional consciousness. Is there anything you'd like to say around that and why that could be important in this?
I think, absolutely, I do. And I, you know, I want to say first, actually, as you were talking, I was looking, I'd written down something that you said in the last section, really, which is about taking down the sense of self. Yes. In the sense of deconstructing it, but I also thought it works in the sense of lowering the sense of self, where we normally are associated with our brains and our heads. We think we're in our heads because that's where our brains are, and we think of our brain as being the sort of, you know, the guiding or the leader, if you like. And actually it's not really. I mean, there are two other contenders for that. One is the guts. Nobody much likes to talk about those except naturopaths, and we love the guts. The other is the heart. And I just had this vision of descending the consciousness from the head, if you like, and embedding it into the heart instead, or opening it up in the heart, and that actually being generally a much better experience. I think some people are more naturally there than others, and I think, you know, I mean, I put my hand up. I'm somebody who's lived in his head for a very long time, and I'm starting to learn those lessons with the help of hawthorn, that actually, you know, and opening up the heart, I think, is it's a very selfless experience in a sense. It cannot be selfish, it cannot be narcissistic if you do that properly, and that's something I think we really need to be promoting.
For sure. And, you know, just to add to what you said there, and of course, I think we've talked about this before, both personally and on podcast, but once we can connect fully into the heart consciousness, that is a direct conduit to 5D, to the unconditional love consciousness, the eagle's perch, where we can see everything unfolding in all of its glory. And from that place, we can put heart into everything. Hence, even my meditation about our friend, Mr. Gates, you know, I say it with my tongue firmly in my cheek, but it's a kind of exercise that I was, you know, taught at Buddhist school, which is to break everything down and see it from a different perspective and see it within the dualistic mechanism with which we live, you know, where we do turn up every day. We have this spacesuit that we're wearing and our consciousness is being
turn up every day. I love it. Yeah, we turn up every day. I've had this, you know, I was saying about dreams earlier. Sometimes I have that sort of weird idea that I might not turn up one day.
Well, think about, you know, from your dream space, you know, as the native.
I opt to come back, yeah.
Right, the indigenous people would say that, you know, when we're in our dream state, we're actually residing in our natural state. So when we wake up, we're literally downloading our consciousness again into the spacesuit, where we have all these amazing plugins of hardware, you know. And again, interestingly, the piece about the snake venoms and the global situation over the last 3 years seems to be doing the rounds again for anyone paying attention on Telegram. Very, very interesting piece from a doctor that links snake venom to the loss of smell and loss of appetite, which is to do with the nicotine receptors. So just, again, pointing people towards that. If you haven't clocked that, do recommend trying to find out about that, because that's a big piece of disclosure right there. But yeah, sure, you know, are we downloading our consciousness into our body from our higher awareness every time we wake up? You know, it's an interesting thought. But, you know, following on from the connection to the heart, and maybe this is something just throwing it out there as an idea, but with, you know, possibly looking at working more with the wonderful medicine of Santa Maria later this year, because that is the 5D medicine, in my opinion. And, you know, we can only really access that properly through the heart. And I've often been amazed now in my sort of older years, reflecting on all of the times that I participated in that wonderful medicine with others, and even observing their reaction to it and wondering why they perhaps didn't quite have the same inner reaction and change in perception that certainly that medicine has given me. And I'm understanding it could be because they were not really connected to their heart. And if you're not connected to your heart, you don't really get the full benefits of the more 5D aspects of the Santa Maria medicine. So these are interesting thoughts, bro, but I think that, you know, what we're pointing towards here with Hawthorn is that it's really, really good for your system. And given the amount of reports of myocarditis and the heart issues that have emerged over the last few years, I would say the heart is a good organ to take care of, because without it, you're probably not going to last very long. And you have something to add?
Sorry?
You have something to add, bro?
No, I was just agreeing with you, and yeah, it's certainly true. You know, you know, most people die because their heart stops, or you know what I mean? Or if their heart stops, then that's probably going to be the consequence. Although you could say that, you know, the heart will probably follow suit if you decide you no longer want to come back, but that's another story, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, I absolutely think the heart is something to take care of. I'm acutely aware of that in my own case. Probably the family member whom I most resemble, my close ancestor, my maternal grandfather, died at my exact age of a sudden heart attack. He was actually in his doctor's office, which I thought was rather neat. But you know, when I see that and I look at my own constitution through my irides, through my irises, and I see the possibility of that in my own case, and it was pointed out to me at one stage by...
Don't call it in, bro. Don't call it in. This is a time of manifestation.
No, I'm not calling it out.
The next show, bro. Listen, I need a co-host.
Don't worry about it, bro. I've faced this for a long time now. I'm not calling it at all. I'm very comfortable talking about it, actually, and it was one of my most revered teachers, I guess, or my most appreciated teachers. I don't revere anybody particularly these days, because I am a reverend myself, but you know, in the truest sense of the word. But he said, you know, he looked at this sign in my iris, and instead of saying, "Oh dear, you've got a family history of heart disease, or you better look after your heart," what he actually said was, "This is a sign that you need to lighten up a bit, not take yourself so seriously, have some fun, laugh," you know. And that's what the heart is about. It's about having fun. It's about connection with people. It's about, you know, cooperation and collaboration rather than competition.
Yeah, I'll hold to all of that, brother. And I think that that's actually really what we're looking at right now is that level of sort of openness and seeing everything as an equal playing field, and seeing everybody as our equal and our opposite, and meeting people in that way, and changing how we even interact, how we agree to do things with each other. You know, I'm really trying to implement a much more common law approach to everything. That's, hey, if we're going to do something together, let's make an agreement. Are we both happy about it? Yes. Well, that's it. That's the basis of the deal. And that can even be in friendships, relationships, work, podcasts, whatever. And I feel that this gives us a much more grounded, heart-centered approach to how to navigate the very, I suspect, challenging energies that are going to sort of come towards us all in the coming days and weeks. And just to add to that, staying in the heart space is really the key to navigating whatever might come up. And for sure, I feel with my own visions and what my allies have shown me, that everybody on the planet has to go through some sort of dark night of the soul, a so-called sort of judgment day, as the Bible would put it. And we have to understand that there is a mechanism through which we can fully understand how to navigate, which is through the heart. And that is the sort of, I guess you could say, it's almost like the ejector seat to our higher self, from where we can see our dualistic behavior as just simply that, dualistic behavior in a sort of somewhat Simpsons simulation that we've been experiencing and avataring or even projecting into from another state of consciousness. And so therefore we should never take any of it too seriously. And the good guys, the bad guys, well, they're all just working for the same person, really, which is, I guess, Great Spirit, who wanted to create this wonderful environment with the plant technology for us to experience something, which I guess is the embodiment of emotions, right, in a three-dimensional form. And that is the human journey, which I feel is now coming to an end. And I posited before that at the beginning of 2020, I had a very strong sense that humanity as it's been existing was going to come to an end, that there were going to be two very distinct alterations that were going to happen to humans, that meant that the humans that we've been up until prior to 2020 were actually going to become obsolete and extinct. And many people were like, oh my gosh, what is he talking about? Is he talking about the end of humans? I'm like, no, I'm talking about the end of the old version of humans. It's a bit like we're getting an upgrade, a bit like
system upgrade. Yeah.
Exactly, a system upgrade. So therefore, the versions of and we can say that moment by moment, Dandelion shows us that the human I was 5 minutes ago is not the human I am now, which is a great meditation, because it really helps you to break down your sense of time and your sense of yourself. And another great Buddhist meditation I learned at Buddhist school was like, well, where do you exactly reside? Do you reside in your thumbnail? Do you reside in your ear? Do you reside in your brain? Do you reside in your, in your little pinky? Well, which part of you is actually Pete, or which part of me is actually David? And the more you do that, the more you realize you can't actually locate yourself, even in your body, right?
Yeah.
So these are all
perpetual question: is this what I am?
Is this what I am? And I think that this is perhaps the biggest meditational offering that I can give to people right now, is keep assessing who you think you really are. Because if you're too attached to who you think you really are, you might find over the coming days and weeks that actually could be quite a painful perspective that you have on yourself. And maybe there's a way of releasing that perspective that allows you to expand into a different type of being that you had never given yourself the opportunity to be before. Yeah. So that's my offering. Pete, what would you like to suggest in how to navigate, as we come to the end of today's shows, the coming days and weeks, and what do you suggest to keep people in the high and happy place?
Well, I think I've sort of said it in a way already. I mean, I think I mentioned right at the beginning, I'm doing fine, but I've made the effort to keep cheerful. I think there's a wonderful moment in one of the last recorded concerts that Leonard Cohen gave, when he announced to the audience, I've been through this, I've been through hell and back, I've been through this, that, and the other. And he said, but somehow cheerfulness kept breaking through. And I love that. I absolutely love that, because it's sort of like, and it's a very gentle kind of cheerfulness. It's not manic, it's not overweening, it doesn't seek to sort of own or judge anybody else, or it's not an indictment, or it's not a mandate. It is simply, how do you, and I don't know how to do it. Sometimes I fail, we all do, but it's like, how do you actually tell yourself constantly that whatever is happening, there is a reason for it. It will reveal its reason in time. You will see that everything is for the best for you, one way or the other, because you've already planned it as such, and there's no going back on that. So I think, and for me, the best route into that is through the heart. And I think, so I think I've already said it.
Yeah, I hope to all of that, brother. And I think that the most important thing we can do is to keep showing up in every moment for ourselves in the most expansive way possible. And if we keep doing that, then we're kind of adhering to our fate and our destiny. And of course, Lucifer decided that everyone should have free will, which was an important part of the dualistic experiment. But every time we break away from our destiny, that's when we accrue karma. And for sure, this whole journey we've been on is the collapsing of the last cycle, right, of the Kali Yuga and many other cycles, and freeing ourselves of the karma of the past. Because if we're carrying karma with us, then we can't really face the scales of Mart and see if our heart is as light as a feather, which is another nice connection to the heart. And so we have to free ourselves of these heavy burdens and energies and belief systems, even about ourselves, how we view ourselves. And, you know, I think that being cheerful for me has been brought on by a number of things. First of all, I think sitting in nature. The amount of times I've just gone and sat under a tree here in this wonderful space we have and looked at the hummingbirds or the butterflies, or even just at the ants building something, and just been reminded of this perfect fractal cycle that nature creates over and over again, which is perfect in its simplicity, but also in its unending complicatedness, or its complexion, I guess. And you know, we can all take enjoyment from the simplest of things, spending time with the loved ones, doing something simple, cooking a nice meal. I've had a lot of enjoyment recently from going back into the kitchen and working with simple ingredients and actually putting love back into my food and feeling the benefit within my body, something that I'd sort of lost the way with. And, you know, reading inspiring books, or even today, I have to give a shout out to Truro City FC, who did win the playoff final against Bracknell Town in the Southern League Premier playoff final. So that gave me a small amount of joy that the only recognisable football team in Cornwall is now only 8 leagues, I think, below the Premier League, somewhere in the lower echelons.
That's worth a round of applause.
It is a round of applause. Let's hear it for Truro City FC, the last bastions of football in Cornwall. So even small things like that, much to Bella, does bring a small amount of joy into my life, to think that Cornwall is representing itself somewhere better in the Football League pyramid than it was 2 days ago. So we have to take joy from
that's a reason to be cheerful, isn't it?
It's a reason to be cheerful, and I'm sure there's at least 400 other Cornishmen out there who are.
Well, you just go back to you know, what's his name, Ian Jury as well. Go on. Reasons to be cheerful.
Reasons to be cheerful, right? Hey, maybe this is a meditation that we can finish with today for everybody. Is like, spend, you know, the next few days or even today finding reasons to be cheerful. What are your top reasons to be cheerful? Write them down. Give them to yourselves as a mantra. Even put them in the chat box, in the comments. We'd love to hear what are your top 3 or 5 reasons to be cheerful. And I would like to share that mine is that New Earth is fully here, and all we have to do is choose inwardly to be a part of it and to make the actions and decisions that lead us to that higher frequency of being. And really and truly, the only person that it relies on is us. So that's my top reason for being cheerful, is that somehow everything in my happiness depends on me, and that's it, which is actually quite reassuring. What's yours, bro? What's your top reason for being happy?
Well, I mean, I think that's it, basically. I mean, I can't do better than that. Can't top it. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm in charge.
I do like tiramisu, so that might make number 2 on my chart.
Sorry?
I do like tiramisu.
Well, tiramisu is definitely a reason to be cheerful. I was actually thinking, you said, you know, the pub holiday restaurant kind of mentality earlier, like it was a bad thing. I quite like pub holidays and restaurants. I'm looking forward to a few of those actually coming up as well. But, you know, I think whatever you do, whether you like those things or not, whether you like football or, you know, music or whatever, you need to stay close to the things that that float your boat in some way, as long as they're not damaging anybody else or the natural world or the environment. You know, we have innocent pleasures, I think, are to be cherished.
Well, as I think the Bible says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I think as we see that the less than meek's system is collapsing around us, all we have to do is hold firm, hold the line. What ho, boys, over the top. We're going to hold the line against the you know, the opponents, and we're going to sweep them from the field and have a resounding victory, as I think Boris Johnson likes to tell himself in his head every time he thinks about his premiership of Britain. I'm sure he runs those stories.
I'm sure he does. Yeah.
But, you know, all joking aside, this is a moment for the glorious ascent of the human kind, and we should not allow ourselves to be distracted by lower frequency energies. And again, you know, just to remind any of our listeners out there, please do keep working with the plans, keep cleansing. It's important. I have to cleanse on a daily basis, particularly from heavily urbanized environments, to keep my vibration high. Otherwise, it does start to palpably nosedive quite quickly. So I'd also just like to draw attention to making sure that your chakra systems stay aligned. If we get out of alignment, it's then that we can perhaps start to be a little more open to less helpful frequencies. So keep paying attention to yourself, keep looking inwards, keep checking in, keep checking to see how is the heart monitor pulsing. Is it high and happy, or is it feeling a little down and subdued? And if it is, what do you need to do? What are, which of your top 3 or 5 happiness generators can you go to make yourself feel good again? So I think this is a great place to finish up today's Web of Wyrd. It's been wonderful to connect. Somehow the internet's held.
We were having trouble, weren't we, when we started?
We were. Yes. And as always, I hope our audience listens to the show where we have our tongue firmly in our cheek through some of the pieces that we select, and understands that we're just trying to point towards what is really going on in our world and how to navigate it with the happiness of happiness. You have anything you want to share, bro, before we finish, including
I'm done, bro. Thanks a lot, and it's been wonderful to reconnect. I've really enjoyed this one. It was a long time coming, but I think good, fantastic. Have a great Beltane, everybody.
Right. And your website again, thenaturalcentre.com.
www.thenaturalcentre.com.
Perfect. And for those who want to find out more about how to work with plants, please do check out our website over at quantumplанthealing.com, and also for other shows on the YouTube channel where I talk to other wonderful people such as Pete and Kelly Hunter, the astrologist, and quite a few other cool friends of mine. So please do check those out. And I'm sure that myself and the brother will be back for another Web of Wyrd in our usual ad hoc style when it feels appropriate. We did try to do it every 2 weeks, but somehow life was a little too challenging to keep that going. So I'm sure that we'll choose another appropriate time slot soon, possibly on the other side of this eclipse season, to see how we're all doing. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, bro, for sharing your erudite wisdom as always. And we'll see you all again very, very soon. Ciao for now.